Wow, good morning, everyone. What a pleasure being here on Saturday morning. And indeed, we are pleased that so many people survived after a long, productive day yesterday. And this is a beautiful day to start a conversation about natural resource governance. As was noted, my name is Oliana Valigura, and I am a regional director at EITI, International Secretariat. We're based in Oslo. And just to give you a flavor of what is the EITI, probably a lot of you have already heard this abbreviation. It's Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, which is a global standard for good governance in the oil, gas, and mineral sector. It enables transparency and accountability in the sector. Perhaps one of the most important features of the EITI is that it's a multi-stakeholder organization where all stakeholders such as government representatives, civil society, industry are gathering together to decide on how country will implement the EITI, what should be disclosed, how that information can be used. So it's a very good dialogue platform that in its design should lead to reforms, informed debate that would lead to reforms in the oil and gas and mining sectors. EITI has been founded around 2002. It was a very funny story when Tony Blair wanted to announce that we should be more transparent about what our companies pay in the countries where they work and what those governments receive. However, he was not, at the last moment, he decided not to announce it. So it was a statement from organization Global Witness saying that Tony Blair has announced creation of the EITI. However, he has never announced it. That's a fun fact. That's how we were created. And over a decade, EITI expanded from just looking into taxes, what companies pay and what governments receive, and that information being reconciled, to covering a really vast amount of information, all of the value chain, looking into licensing, looking into the reserves, looking into exports, production data, beneficial ownership. Now we have contract transparency as a requirement. It's a major win in 2019. It's also commodity trading, oil, gas, transit and transportation, social expenditures, how the revenues are being distributed, and what is the environmental impact of extractive companies, what are the payments they pay in terms of environment, and also gender aspects, how many women are engaged in the extractive industries and what are their role there. And just to give you more understanding of what is the EITI's impact, I would like to show you a video, and if I can ask, yeah, thank you. so much for showing the video. And EITI is governed by what we call EITI standard. Here I have a little copy, and we had more yesterday at the handouts table. And this is our rule of ladder that we follow, and there are 52 implementing countries that follow this standard and EITI in general. And here at this panel we have quite a few very experienced EITI stakeholders here that I would like to introduce. We have Oleksiy Orlovsky. He's a Democratic Practice Program Director at International Renaissance Foundation in Ukraine. We have Lusine Tovmasyan, head of EITI National Secretariat in Armenia. We also have Davit Maisuradze, who's the manager of the educational certification program on fighting corruption at the IDFI. Narine Tadevosyan, mining governance consultant at the World Bank, also based in Armenia. And Emil Omarov, Eurasia regional coordinator at Publish What You Pay organization. And today they will be sharing their experience and impact of the EITI. And I would like to address my first question to Oleksiy Orlovsky. Oleksiy, aside of being program director at IRF, he's also a member of the national multi-stakeholder group in Ukraine that decides on the EITI, and also he's EITI board member on the international level, representing Eurasia from civil society constituency. And my first question would be, if you could share the importance of transparency and accountability in the extractive industries, what countries in Eurasia did you represent implement the EITI, and why did Ukraine join EITI?
Good morning, colleagues. I am really happy to be a part of this very important event, and I will be very happy to share my personal experience, because today I will be speaking not on behalf of the EITI board, not on behalf of some official institutions from our region, but I will express my personal vision, what kind of ideas, how we can use EITI for better governance in our region. First of all, I will start from the list probably of countries which are implement EITI at the present moment, but I should say that we have absolutely different lists from the international secretariat point of view, from civil society point of view, implementing countries point of view, etc. What does it mean, Eurasia region? And that is why, because I am a representative of civil society constituency, I will give you information from this perspective. In Eurasia region, in this understanding, we have 7 acting countries. I mean Mongolia, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Armenia, Ukraine, and Albania. So this list is not very big, as you see, but I hope very much that we will have some new countries very soon, and I hope very, very much that one of them will be Georgia, because we started some activities concerning joining to EITI from Georgian and Ukrainian side at the same time. It happened in the end of 2007. And I should say that when I first heard about this initiative, I accepted it like a very important anti-corruption tool from the beginning. It's happened, as I said already, in the end of 2007. And for example, for many countries, and Ukraine was among them, especially at that period of time, for many countries, money from extractive industries played not very good role in political corruption. That is real. This is reality for many countries, for our region, and not only for our region. And that's why I understand this initiative, first of all, from the anti-corruption point of view, because participation of this initiative, if you participate in this initiative, you must open some scope of information which was closed before. And it is very important from my point of view that this initiative is extremely dynamic. Because when we started from implementation from the beginning, from 2002 or 2007, it doesn't matter, we have only one important maybe instrument for openness information. From one side, company gives the information, how many and what kind of payments they paid to different budgets. And from another side, different governance institutions opened the same information, but from their point of view, how many what's sum of money they got from different companies to different kinds of budgets. And now, as Oliana mentioned already, this is much more complicated initiative because in addition to this regular information, country, companies, etc. Must open some extra information like about beneficial owners, about it is necessary to open information about contracts, some information in the environmental sphere, starting to implement some different e-tools, etc. So we can, you have seen already this important list of potential benefits which countries, companies, civil society, communities, etc. Are receiving in the process of EITI implementation. I can show you only a couple examples from Ukrainian, for example, perspective. What does it mean when we are speaking about impact of EITI? For example, when we started this initiative, we had practically all this information closed for general public. Now, as you had already, we have a beneficial ownership register. We became the first country in the world which opened this register to general public. For example, when we joined to this initiative, we have no special legislation which regulate these different aspects of implementation of this initiative. Now we have a special, we call this is like EITI legislation in Ukraine, which included a lot of different international requests into our national legislation. For example, now we have very important regulations about openness information, openness information about payments of companies to the local budgets. Now 5% rent payments companies paid to different local budgets. My colleague Vitaly Filenko, he is here. He will present a little bit more about this part of the activity in our country a little bit later after lunch during a special workshop which will be organized in the next room. So this will be his part of presentation a little bit later, etc., etc. But in the end of this my short presentation, I should say a couple words about another aspect. Frankly speaking, in different countries of the world, we have no clear instrument how to measure this impact to economy, to investment, to relationship between different stakeholders, etc. Unfortunately, we have not such instrument in different countries, and we started to develop this instrument for Ukraine. And I should say that our colleagues from NGO, the name of this NGO, Dixie Group, developed a special draft of the document. The name is Monitoring and Evaluation System for Ukraine EITI. This is not official document yet. We discussed it already during our last MSG meeting. We will discuss this document till the end of this year, and we will identify the baseline for EITI implementation for 2013, when our country finally joined to EITI, and till the present moment. It will be extremely important information, and I'm absolutely sure that each implementing country should have such one too.
Thank you, Oleksiy. You actually answered my second question that I planned to ask you later on, but thank you, that saves us some time. And I would like to ask Lusine to tell us more about why Armenia joined the EITI. What are the benefits that you see for Armenia and for implementing the EITI?
Thank you, Oliana, and I also want to thank IDFI for organizing this very good forum, and thank you for inviting us to participate. Armenia is a fairly new member of the EITI family. We joined the EITI 2017, and currently we are undergoing our first validation, which is assessment of the progress of the first 3 years of implementation of EITI. And becoming a member of EITI, it's not very straightforward, and countries shall implement several sign-up steps to be ready to apply to become an EITI member country. And it all started in Armenia in 2015, when Prime Minister of Armenia, during the Anti-Corruption Council meeting, announced the commitment of government of Armenia to become an EITI member country. And as you see in Armenia, the anti-corruption nature of EITI was at the beginning emphasized, and after that actually became the hardest part is the formation of MSG. I would say that it's without effective and knowledgeable MSG, any country can't have a big success of EITI, because you can have as much information as you need published or not published in several systems or reports, but if there is no any platform that will join all stakeholders, government, companies and civil society, which come together as partners, as equals, and decide to together agree on several parts of issues that country has. Actually, it's the availability of information is meaningless, and what is important is how transparency and accountability may impact on good governance of the sector. So it was crucial to have this knowledgeable MSG, and actually civil society of Armenia have some preconditions to participate in MSG multi-stakeholder group, and one of it was that all the decisions that MSG would taken should be by consensus. So if any party of a multi-stakeholder group, be it civil society, companies, of government, do not agree on this decision, then it can't be passed, and it shall be further discussed. And government was ready to accept this decision, and after having this terms of references of forming MSG, we have our effective MSG, which was also adopted by the Prime Minister order, and we applied to become an EITI member country. And I know that Georgia has wished to implement EITI, and I would give one advice to Georgia: be as ambitious as possible, because over the course of time, you will see that actually it's not that easy to implement everything that you wrote on your action plan, and some challenges might arise over the time, and if you put a higher benchmark for you to implement this transparency and accountability KPIs, the better result you shall get. And what Armenia did, the multi-stakeholder group decided that every information on financial flows of the metal mining sector of Armenia shall be transparent. And then we saw that we have some legislative obstacles to do that, because we have tax secrecy, which did not allow to make public companies' financial flows. And we decided to put EITI requirement in legislation, and we also have some legislative mandatory obligations both for metal mining companies and inline state bodies to provide annual reports that cover all financial flows regarding metal mining companies. Another step was to decide how this reporting shall occur. And we decided to create online platform that all the information, all financial information shall be provided online, which will make life easier for all reporting bodies. And also in that way we will have open data from the beginning, and which will give us opportunity to put some filters or other tools in our platform, which will give an opportunity to civil society or other stakeholders, to academy, to scientific organizations, to analyze the data as easy as possible. We have our platform, and during the workshop we can actually showcase, if someone is interested, how we're doing it. Another good benefit from this process was the issue of open contracts. And before that, the answer from the government side was that the contracts contain secret information and it's impossible to open the contracts. And during this discussions with MSG, we decided to study what actually contracts contain, and is there any secret information that it does not allow us to open the contracts. And the result was that there is no secret information, and the decision was made, and it also written in the law, that contracts are open in Armenia. So we also in 2018 published all metal mining contracts. The benefit of that was that we had an information that previously was even not accessible for state bodies. For example, the information about social economic contributions of metal mining companies. The tricky part in Armenia is that we have a new subsoil code starting from 2012, and the contracts signed before that do not contain any social economic obligations from companies' side. And they are doing this contribution in voluntary basis with negotiations with communities or by other means. What we have now, we know the list of companies that have these obligations. We know what social economic contributions are doing these companies, and also by EITI reporting, we require companies to declare all their voluntary social economic contributions in communities. So that was another tool to measure the impact of mining in communities. because actually mining activities are mainly based in not in capital in Yerevan, but other parts, other regions of Armenia, which gives it an importance because there are not many economic opportunities for communities, and it is important to measure how much impact the sector has on development of communities.
And I'm afraid I'm going to stop you
Yeah.
here.
Okay. Thank you.
We had an agreement with the panelists that I'll be stopping them after 7 minutes, but we'll come back to Armenia again. Thank you, Lusine. And Davit, question to you. I had the pleasure of reading this very interesting research on EITI in Armenia, and perhaps you can introduce us a bit. What are the extractive industries in, I'm sorry, in Armenia, in Georgia. I apologize, too many Armenians here. EITI in Georgia, and what is the extractive sector here, and where do you think EITI could be helpful? What are the challenges that you see, and how do you think EITI could address them here?
Thank you very much for the question. First of all, I would like to thank you to donor community for supporting IDFI to organize such a wonderful event. Thank you for mentioning our research. For the, I would say maybe it's for like 6 to 8 years, IDFI voluntarily supports implementation of EITI principles in Georgia, and we are advocating EITI principles in Georgia and trying to do as much research as possible to make to support our government officials to make informed decision. Economically and socially speaking, the mining sector is important to Georgia. In 2019, copper ores and ferroalloys made up more than 22% of Georgia's exports. There are over 1,000 registered companies that operate in the industry since 2011, and the sector employs more than 6,000 people, and the number grows annually. By 6,000, we mean the number of employees who are officially registered as employees, but the number of stakeholders is higher, definitely. Georgia is among the countries where gold was mined since 6 millennia before Christ, and despite the fact that the gold mines are not abundant in Georgia as of today, gold has become a matter of social protest in several occasions. Gold mines have been considered as a health and environmental hazard, and also part of cultural heritage. We used to have the oldest golden mine in Georgia until 2014. According to Article 2nd of the Law of Georgian Subsoil, mineral resources located on land, territorial waters, continental shelf, and the special economic zone of Georgia belong to the state. The Ministry of Environment Protection and Agriculture of Georgia and its subordinate agencies carry out of public administration of mineral resources. National Environment Agency is the public entity responsible for issuing subsoil use licenses, and there are also some other agencies and sub-agencies, for example, Environmental Information and Education Center, which operates a portal where licenses and permits on subsoil use can be found. The map on the web page gives also to the interested parties basic cadastral map of the property and exact location of the extractive operation. Georgia is not the we are producers of oil and gas, but the number of our produced gas and oil is insignificant to the largest producers of gas and oil. Annual production of the oil is between 60 to 140 tons, and the gas production, comparing the annual consumption of Georgia is 0.5%. Therefore, Georgia's demand on natural gas is mainly balanced by imported gas. We in oil and gas sector, we also have several agencies and sub-agencies and also state-owned companies. The good thing about EITI is that EITI principles support also transparency in state-owned companies. Non-governmental sector in Georgia, together with international organizations, for years are trying to increase transparency in state-owned companies. Therefore, we hope that EITI can be the core mechanism to at least increase the transparency in extractive industries, at least in state-owned companies which operate in extractive industries. Another important thing regarding Georgia is that we are trying to use our strategic location as a connector of Asia and Europe, and with this regard we have several pipelines which transport oil and gas from Azerbaijan to Turkey and other countries of Europe. Transportation of which is then distributed to other countries of Europe. Transportation of gas and oil is another important aspect of the extractive industries for Georgia. In this regard, involvement of private companies and third countries should be also considered when discussing the full potential of Georgia as a transit country for oil and gas. British Petroleum, with its Georgian branch, is one of the major actors in transportation sector of oil and gas. After having operated energy transit projects in Georgia for 19 years, BP can be considered as the lead investor and operator of Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, South Caucasus gas pipeline, and the Western Route export pipeline, also known as Baku-Supsa pipeline. These pipelines consist of the bulk of Georgia's energy transit capacity. Baku-Supsa pipeline was opened in April 1999 to transport oil from the Caspian Basin to Western markets via Georgia's Black Sea terminal at Supsa. Basically, the gas, oil, and oil industry and extractive industries in Georgia have problems regarding transparency because we lack the transparency standard that is established by EITI. There are problems with the mining sector regarding health and environmental issues, and we can continue talking about such problems as protecting cultural heritage, protecting labor rights, increasing the accountability of the companies which are working there. We assume that we are all aware that investors generally throughout the world make the investment decisions based on, for example, based on a high level of transparency, clear and transparent licensing procedures, security of licenses, and access to information on geological potential and the mineral resource endowment of the country. The thing that we also like regarding ITI is that we hope that in Georgia, EITI would support further investments and socially responsible growth of the extractive industry sector. Thank you.
Wow, so punctual. Thank you, David. No, it seems really that EITI has some potential in Georgia, albeit relatively small mining sector, but I can see some potential here. My next question, we're going back to Armenia. Armenia, Georgia panel. Narine, you're as a World Bank consultant, there must be a reason why international donors are supporting EITI, and my question to you would be, what is a good governance in the extractive sector, and how EITI is addressing the value chain components?
Thank you. We have our guest speaking about specific countries. I will have a look a little bit wider to the mining sector globally. I guess everyone here in the room knows that mining sector is one of the difficult and challenging sectors in the world, and each of us knows specifically in our countries how it's difficult to tackle with these issues. So the World Bank takes extractives as one of the key aspects for sustainable development. As was mentioned in your video, sustainable development goals and sustainable development is also very much depending on the sustainable development of the mining sector. What I mean saying sustainable development of mining sector is that there are key three components that should be parallelly in place. It's economic part, social, and environmental. What this mean? Usually we kind of understand that if mining sector is there, it means economic already happens. But it's not like that, because several researches show that even though mining is happening, but there is no profitability, or there is not happening economic growth in that country, or especially in the communities where it's happening. From the other side, social aspect, which means that mining should help communities and countries to be able to have living standards in place, to have education, health, and other costs covered. And from the other part, which is the most talked and challenging part, is environmental part, which means if we are doing mining, we at least damage air, land, and water. So saying sustainable, it means all these three parts are in place, and they are going to a development aspect. From the other side, we all now very happy to hear that renewable energy is coming on. We are going to have more environmental friendly technologies like electrical cars, batteries, and other technologies, which is, for me, is one side of the medal. It's quite good to have this all happening in the world, and I know in Georgia they already announced that since 2021, if I'm not mistaken, only electrical cars will be available. So, but the other side usually is not bringing up. So how we are going to get all these? We need more resources. We need more extraction, and it means we have going to have more problems and challenges, because right now, especially civil society, and I'm sure everyone as a person knows that mining with all these environmental problems creates challenges and problems for government itself, for businesses, and for civil society. So having the second side of the medal, we should think how to bring up new governance models, how to bring the same renewable energy to mining site, because mining sector is one of the key users of electricity. Generally in the world, more than 15% of electricity is used by mining sector. So if we are talking about renewable energy, it means we should think how mining itself can use this renewable energy to make sure that copper, which is produced in Armenia or in Georgia, then used for building windmill for wind power, which is one of the key users of copper, then not bringing more environmental or social issues, but helping to develop sustainability. So EITI, one of the instruments that World Bank is taking into account for good governance. There are several other aspects, especially now the World Bank is initiating climate smart mining facility, which will help countries with rich resources, especially the resources which are needed for this upcoming electrical cars, batteries, and renewable energy, to be able from the beginning to set up governance models that help us to have sustainability in the sector, in the country, and generally in the world. Coming back to EITI, your video already showed the line where it's involved, starting from licensing and contracts, going back to sustainability and tackling income generation, taxes, distribution of revenues from the sector, which all are part of general value chain of mining sector. And if we look to this perspective, it means if you do review all these aspects, it means you are improving your governance. I should say that implementing EITI standard, it's not just tick of boxes that we did this, but when you start to think and review what you have, is it in line with the EITI standard or not, you are finding out new aspects that are not covered in your legislation yet. So you are really reviewing and amending your legislation, which is comes from EITI, but not for EITI, because in the future it is for the sector and it is for the country. So EITI is a good tool for good governance, but it's not, of course, taking all aspects of the governance. But I'm very happy to see that year by year, the EITI is including key aspects of sector in the standard. And now I should say with this new 2019 standard, it almost has key parts of this sustainability. It has social part, it's had environmental part, and it's always had the economic part. So I'm sure in the future will be more aspects coming in, which will help countries to cover all these three aspects together.
Thank you. A bit ahead of the time. I wasn't even prepared. No, indeed. And the changes, you might think that the changes to EITI standard are random, or every 3 years we yet create new standards and new requirements, but it's a lot of the changes are driven by implementing countries, introducing better practice, and also improving the requirements to make the reporting smoother and better. Thank you, Narine. And Emil, you are, I had the pleasure of working with you for quite a long time, and you are one of driving forces in Eurasia for implementing the EITI. I mean, by you, I mean the civil society. And my question to you would be why the civil society is advocating, is campaigning for transparency in the extractive industries, campaigning for the EITI, and also inspired by yesterday's heated discussion on Azerbaijan, would be good if you could comment why civic space is so important for the EITI.
Thank you very much. First of all, on behalf of Publish What You Pay, I would like to thank organizers IDFI for such an amazing event and bringing so many brilliant minds here to our region. And I really support the idea of organizing periodic annual events because unfortunately we lack these opportunities, and also I would like to support on behalf of Publish What You Pay, express our support to future involvement of Georgian civil society in EITI, and Publish What You Pay is the only global movement of civil society anti-corruption organizations promoting good governance and working to make sure that oil, gas, and mining revenues benefit the people. And so with over 50 coalitions around the world and more than 700 organizations, Publish What You Pay has enormous experience in working in different environments. And in fact, Publish What You Pay, the name, we have kept our name from the campaign which happened in early 2000s, and which was asking companies to publish what they pay to governments, and this campaign led to creation, also was one of the reasons why EITI was established. And since that time we have been on board, we have been with the EITI on global level, on local level, making sure that civil society is resilient, is well organized and well coordinated, influential to further to make sure that EITI is developing and it's relevant to the needs of people. And currently, Publish What You Pay is also is coordination focal point for civil society on the international EITI board. So we work a lot with on global level, on local level, and so since EITI is one of the primary framework for most of our members, last year Publish What You Pay led production of the guide for civil society. So we have some copies of this for our activists from different countries which plan to work more with EITI. So it's a comprehensive guide on how to engage effectively based on the experience of Publish What You Pay. So coming back to the question why we need more transparency. The short answer is that extractive sector is the most corrupt sector of economy. So for Publish What You Pay members around the world, EITI is one of the components of global movement towards transparency and accountability in extractive industry, as well as a important part of solution to the resource curse. And obviously this global movement extends well beyond EITI. There are different opportunities, new sources of different sources of information, such as mandatory disclosures and some of the new legislations introduced in the EU, Canada, UK, and so on. And so these also provide a lot of information, a lot of that is used, that is beneficial for this dialogue between between these different stakeholders. So for the civil society, EITI is also an important tool to hold both governments and companies to account, because we all know well that unfortunately in some cases extractive companies impose their conditions, and their this usually I mean these disadvantages are having so the conditions are sometimes not in favor of the countries, and this and here also in civil society is very interested to be also monitoring this part of this of the work. So in general, in Publish What You Pay, we have discovered that the EITI stands or falls with the successful, with the engagement of the civil society. So only a well-coordinated, influential, and inclusive civil society work can lead to change throughout this whole EITI process, will result in reforms, in good, in positive directions in governance on local and on global level. So, also civil society input underpins success throughout the EITI from consultation with affected communities on local level about the EITI report, to dissemination of results, dissemination of findings, making policy recommendations, and driving reforms. And and also speaking about this, so yes, we have this information. We have been asking for it as civil society for many years. Now we have a lot of information disclosed here, and from EITI, from mandatory disclosure, beneficial ownership platforms and registers. So what do we do now? So there is a responsibility on civil society at this point to use this information and to make sure that this information is actually transformed to knowledge, to some, so this data becomes an information that can be used, that makes sense, and that it's also knowledge that will enable civil society to change, to achieve those, or advocate or achieve those changes in the society or in their countries. And as in my current role as a coordinator for the Eurasia region, we share the same countries as Oleksiy was mentioning, so about 10 countries working in this part of the world. And EITI has provided such an unique opportunity for civil society, because for the first time, civil society was invited to sit at the table, around the same table with companies, with government. So especially for us coming from this background of 30 years ago, it's such a unique opportunity. And then obviously there were other initiatives such as OGP and so on, which also create opportunities. But this particularly, this issue, I mean, this created a lot of opportunities. And I think that there is still a big potential in our region for civil society and international partners to cooperate and to achieve more results, become more coordinated, more organized. And there are many joint issues, and as published in the
I'm afraid, Emil, I need to stop you here.
Yeah. I will cover the second question then.
Yes, then I'll come back to you. And just before we continue, a question to organizers. We started 15 minutes later. Do we have those 15 minutes, or do we have to finish at 11:30? Okay. Okay, thank you. Then I would just to kind of kick off a discussion after all these presentations. I would have quick questions, and I would appreciate if you would have very short answers, 1 or 2 minutes, if that's okay, and then we'll allow the audience also to ask questions. So Emil gave a good segue into bringing OGP into the picture, and Oleksiy, you are also a lot involved in the OGP. How do EITI and OGP work together in Ukraine and in other countries?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you, Oliana. This is extremely important question. From my point of view, Ukrainian case is really interesting. As I mentioned already, we started our activity on EITI direction in the end 2007, in the beginning of 2008. So we, when I say we, I mean civil society. So civil society tried to push our government to joining to EITI from that period of time. But I should say we spent around 4 even more years for advocacy of this joining, but unfortunately without big success. We have no political will from the government side, and that's why when we heard about joining of our country to OGP, we decided to use this window of opportunity, and we proposed our government to include one extra obligation to our first action plan, I mean joining to EITI, and it's happened. Because of some processes, I have no time to explain all these processes in the beginning 2012, but finally our government included such obligation in our first action plan. And I should say that Ukraine is the only country in the world, I'm sorry, which has different kind of obligations concerning EITI in all 4 OGP action plans. So if we summarize this part, this question, my answer to this question, short answer to this question, I should say that OGP is a really important tool to pushing different other international initiatives like EITI for such countries like Ukraine and probably for other countries, not only from our region.
Thank you, Oleksiy. Lusine, so what is it we heard the issues you had in Armenia and how you overcame them, and you even gave some advices to Georgia in terms of how to join EITI. So what is it for you in EITI? You said the Prime Minister announced it in 2015. Apparently it was important. So why it is important for you? What is it that you see in EITI for your country?
I could say that currently mining sector is under the scrutiny of civil society, and there are huge debates on do we need mining sector that is not as responsible as it should be, or how it actually invests in development of the country, development of communities, is it sustainable or not? So before implementing EITI, the debate wasn't as informed as it should be, because we lacked a lot of information that will equip the parties to create their arguments more justified and informed way, and it leaves a lot of information, leaves less space for manipulations. So it is important to have all this data, not only for civil society but also for the government, because sometimes, well, government can get information they need, but sometimes it will take a lot of time to inquire from other institutions to get this, to analyze this, and the EITI just creates this platform that everything is there, and you should it provides the links, and also I also would like to mention the importance of systematic data disclosure and mainstreaming, going from EITI reporting to the publication of open data information in systems, governmental and companies systems, that will make the routine disclosures and make life of both three parties so much easier, creating a very good debate over the issues that exist in the country. And I would also like to mention the importance of this new requirement of EITI, the environmental aspect of EITI, because when we were starting in Armenia EITI, several CSOs just said that it's not important because it does not answer to the questions that we are interested in, and it's mainly environmental issues because we have this Soviet bad history, abandoned mines, and also not every mining company operates in responsible way. So it is very important to broaden the involvement of civil society when we also discuss environmental issues, and Armenia is going to put much emphasis on also these issues.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's good to hear. Davit, what are the issues why Georgia can't join EITI? You've been advocating for quite some years. What are the concerns of the government?
It's a good question. As our panelists have mentioned, they have raised several issues. For example, our colleagues from Armenia mentioned about the involvement of third parties and like secrecy of information regarding extractive industry, secrecy of information contained in contracts. Which gives opportunity for the corporations to use lack of transparency as a fertile ground to get as much gain as possible, and as Emil has mentioned, the extractive industry sphere is probably the most corrupt sphere. These, I would say that these are the basic reasons which helps. Which not helps, but which, based on these issues, probably all governments throughout the world, and including government of Georgia, is trying to be as cautious as possible. Yesterday, we had a very fruitful negotiations with involving EITI Secretariat, representatives of government of Georgia, and IDFI about the potential of continuing the further implementation of EITI principles. I would say that the good thing what I like in EITI is that it doesn't give you the ready commitments to implement. You can start with implementing smaller commitments, and you can gradually raise the level of transparency or the protection of labor rights or involvement of local communities. What we think that the government is lacking is the basic document which can, despite of the researches or advocacy activities what we have done, they lack the basic document which can help them to make informed decision, and the document which might say that this is not bad and on the contrary this is good, it will increase your efficiency and it will increase the social responsibility of the sector, and it will attract further investments.
Thank you, Davit. Yeah, and I hope that governments in Georgia and civil society here can work on that kind of scoping study or a document that would inform and help the government make a final decision. And Narine, why is it important that government, civil society, and companies talk together and make decisions? What is it in the multi-stakeholder governance?
Thank you for the question, because it's one of my favorite part of EITI. EITI itself, globally and locally, it's multi-stakeholder governance and group which is leading the process, which means we have all key three parties, civil society, business, and government, in one table. Several times in Armenia, in other countries, including Georgia, I hear that why civil society cannot take and implement EITI itself or push the idea to have EITI, or the government can take and do that, why we need to become a member of EITI and form this difficult structure to deal with that. There is no way that we will have the same result without multi-stakeholder group, because before EITI, it's happening. Country has government, civil society is there, business is there, everyone is doing something, but everyone is always not satisfied, because civil society is demanding from the government and businesses to be more transparent, to do everything in a good way, to not damage environment. From their side, business always is demanding from the government side to make more better environment, decreasing taxes, giving them incentives for new investments, and government from their side demanding from the business something to do better, and well, and from civil society to help them to come to the solutions. But it doesn't happen when you are not in the one table and you didn't have that environment to open discussions and find solutions. It's not the only reason that you are in the same room, but the environment in that room should be quite open to allow everyone to speak out and to bring ideas, challenges, problems to the table, and then discuss together to find solutions. As I mentioned, for me it's important this development in the standard, which also, as you mentioned, is coming from the experience, but also because all these three parties are part of the board. Because civil society brings some ideas, then business brings some ideas, then governments bringing, and then when they are discussing all this, they are finding out some more than should be there. And I should say that MSG is not only for EITI, it is a very good platform for generally sector governance, starting from policy, going to legislation, and of course continuing to be part of EITI. In our case, in Armenia, I should say that it really works in that way. It's not only MSG for EITI, it's MSG for the mining sector, and they are very much involved in different discussions. And I'm sure that in case of Georgia, even having in mind several other issues regarding to the small sector, not well, still under development of legislation, maybe they are not going to join EITI tomorrow. But having in mind that Georgia is now going to the big reforms of the sector, it will be quite good to establish multi-stakeholder group, which will from the beginning participate in all discussions and be informed and inform everyone from the beginning. And then if they are joining EITI, it's already there. So a multi-stakeholder group can be also taken from EITI, but not only for EITI.
Thank you, Narine. And as you said, civil society brings ideas, then company comes in, companies, and they bring them down, and then government constituency balance them up, and that's how we get where we are right now. But why is it important to have enough civic space, Emil, for the EITI to be successful?
EITA is a space of permanent negotiations between the stakeholder constituencies. So just sitting there, just attending those MSG or just signing up, just being part of it, does not mean that there will be impact, there will be change. So for that, civil society needs resilience and sophisticated strategy. And you can imagine that when there is one person or just a group of persons just which cannot prove that they are connected to the rest of society or wider civil society sitting around table with companies which have enormous financial resources, and the government which controls the state apparatus. So you can see that in this setup, the civil society, and it will not be taken seriously. So with that purpose, Publish What You Pay works with civil society on different levels to ensure that they're resilient, they're coordinated, they're influential, they're inclusive, and in order to be heard, in order to be treated equally. Otherwise, it's very complicated, very difficult. So, as we know, civil society role is officially anchored in the EITI institutional structure, and I mean, it's giving equal say in decision making on global and local level governance, but recognizing importance of engagement, of adequate civil society engagement and participation in light of rising threats against civil society, which is engaged in natural resource governance, which is probably the most risky area of work for civil society. The International EITI board in 2015 adopted a civil society protocol, and this is a civil society protocol then became part of the EITI standard in 2016, and the civil society protocol provides assessment framework to evaluate compliance with civil society participation in the standard, and it has got 5 areas. The civil society protocol assesses the freedom of association, expression, operation, access to public decision making, and civil society participation in EITI in general. So as you can imagine, in this setup, it's important that the civil society, so the governments which have signed up to EITI, they really need to provide these opportunities, these freedoms to civil society to be able to strategically engage and to be able to work with with society, with different stakeholders, and also failing to do so is obviously creating major obstacles in the state's participation, because the country does not seem to be sincere. Because from one side you have these disclosures, but if these disclosures do not lead to public dialogue or discussion, these disclosures have no point for people. It doesn't make change, or there is no space for this to become a change. Or so in that case, obviously civil society participation becomes pointless, because they cannot really do their part as civil society.
Thank you, Emil. And indeed, EITI is only strong when 3 parties are strongly represented and are strong in the process. And that's how EITI succeeds. Thank you so much.